as the night is creeping. Trying to keep alive the things I'm seeing. Caught here while the world is sleeping. And to think all of the years go by. I know for me I can make it to the light. I know for me. You know the air is dry. Call out when I see but the words won't form right. And now it's like a ghost town. Am I on my own here, thinking of the future all alone here, with the riddle of the light and the chaos of the night. It's the greatest feeling when you lift me up, I touch the clouds. Still across the dreaming, so you pull me up, I'm so up from the ground. Even though we know it won't last, teach me not to throw it all away. Step with caution to the daylight, killing questions in the deep of my mind, creeping closer to the deadline, suffocated by the years gone by. But I know for me I can make it through the fight. I know for me it's the greatest feeling when you lift me up, I touch the clouds. Still across the dreaming, so you pull me up, I'm so up from the ground. Even though we know it won't last, teach me how to throw it all
Everybody. What's up, everybody? It's Steven here with Neural DSP, and this week on our Q&A, we have Keshav from Skyharbor and White Moth Black Butterfly. So, how you doing, man?
Good, man. Good to finally be here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to have you on.
Awesome.
Awesome. So, what have you been up to?
Well, this and that, and just like existential dread, and fears about the end of the world, and then just, every now and then you just think, what do I do for a living? I actually get to make music for a living despite all of this stuff. So it's just like, check your privilege and just be really grateful to the universe that we actually like get to do this while the world is falling apart around us. So like, good.
Yeah.
Other than that, just the usual, really. Ever since touring stopped completely, I think, like most of us who were in like touring bands, we've kind of been forced to, embrace the studio side of things entirely.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I was fortunate enough that like that's something that I already did. I mean, that was my day job, even when, my band, like Skyharbor and stuff, used to tour like pretty heavily 2017 through to 2019, and then everything went off. And I think I was really grateful to already have a little bit of a foothold in the studio scene, and media composition and film and television sort of stuff. So that's how kept me in good stead, busy doing music.
Yeah.
Much.
Yeah. That's awesome, though. I mean, like, existential dread aside, I mean, like, it seems like you still have like work on your plate and things are coming out. White Moth Black Butterfly released a single, like last month or the month before?
No, actually just last week, I think.
Last week. Oh, man.
It's just, I feel like, time moves differently these days, so it's completely okay to like have absolutely no idea what happened when. it baffles me that like we're already in the middle of April, first of all. Like I refuse to believe that. Like it's not, I mean, we're talking COVID-19 and we're in like April 2021, right?
Yeah.
What the hell is going on? But yeah, that happened last week. And yeah, so that's another thing because of all of what's been going on, and like there's this whole feeling creative is anyway like it becomes a little bit of a stress. And then there was this point, I actually remember this very distinctly. There was this point because touring was getting really stressful. There was just like stress building up in general across everything, and then the pandemic hit. And I remember like one day just like picking up my guitar, and the feeling that I felt, bizarrely enough, wasn't one of like, all right, cool, let's have a jam. It was more like guilt. And I was just like, what? Like, how has it come to this? Like the thing which is supposed to be my outlet has now become a monkey on my back. And I realized what was happening was that I was just associating all of this with like activities that were causing me like distress, like whether it be financial or this or that or whatever. I was like, I need to like rethink everything. And sorry, I forget how I got onto this track.
I think we were talking some existential dread, and that we get to do music during the pandemic. Yeah.
So I mean, creativity was hard to come by, and I think it took me a while. I mean, I basically didn't write any music all of 2020, and I think except like till the very end. And I think Dan, who's the singer of White Moth, Black Butterfly, also sings for Tesseract, as everyone knows.
Mm-hmm.
So we were contacted by our label, K-Scope, which again, like I'm very grateful to be on a label because they actually came up to us and said, okay, we need a new record from you guys. And we would like to have it by so-and-so date, and we're going to give you like so-and-so like minuscule budget, but something. So it was just like, all right, like I actually have an impetus to sit and, maybe be creative again without necessarily feeling guilty about it, like where am I going to earn from, all of that stuff. I think when you do this for so long, where you've got like one album out, 2 albums out, 3 albums out, after a point, like you kind of start having expectations, and if those expectations aren't met, then it results in stress and resentments and things like that. So so it felt really good to have someone come up and say, look, could you just take the next month off and make some music for us to release? Great. So and it's not metal, White Moth is like completely different. And basically the whole point of that band was to just do anything that doesn't involve distorted guitars and pounding drums. Because Dan and I, that's what we do. That's what we've become sort of known for. Like Tesseract is everyone knows what that band sounds like. Skyharbor's, we live in that similar world, that metal progressive guitar world.
Yeah.
And so it was very freeing, actually, very liberating. Pick up the guitar and just think very differently from how I would think normally, or be expected to, which is weird because when you start out, even when I started with the whole Skyharbor thing, and I think I was actually thinking about this earlier today, this whole scene, right? Like the D word,
right.
This whole that thing, like that whole scene that's been a thing, I feel like for a little over a decade now. It started out being like this wonderful like ocean of like where everyone was welcome, right? Like you could be really free and not be like a rock star kind of personality or whatever. Like you could be a nerd and still be welcomed. Not just welcome, like you could actually be celebrated because if there were no rules, like people were making records in their bedrooms and all of that stuff. And it was amazing. But I think at some point, like as people kept pushing boundaries more and more, and of course, like, it wasn't just freeing for us as artists and creators, but I think even for people like yourselves, right? Like people, innovators in the world of tech, innovators in the world of, say, even like full-time producers, like say your Nollies, who were pushing the boundaries of like production and philosophy behind engineering and mixing and that stuff, or like someone like a Tosin Abasi who's like pushing the envelope when it comes to the very concept of guitar playing.
Absolutely.
Which, after so long, one would have thought, okay, we know all that there is to know about guitar, except he comes and introduces you to things you've never known. So I feel like as someone in the beginning who was like super like, wow, this is so cool, because where everyone's sort of like on an even footing. We, it was that generation of bands that came through like on social media and message boards. So you feel a little more connected to them and a little more close to them. And I feel at some point, I don't know when, but there started to be this thing about chops and about being a nerd, which in the beginning was very freeing, like I said, but
Right.
at that point, I actually started to feel guilty again, because I was like, why am I not obsessing about, like the guts of, say, every amp circuit that's out there? But at the same time, I can be just as passionate about having great guitar tone, like, so, and this is of course before you guys came on the scene. And I think, like the products that were very ubiquitous were like, like the XFX and stuff like that, amazing tools. But there's like definitely, like we were talking about earlier, a steep learning curve where it's like,
Yep.
You feel like this pressure that like, I need to know what every single thing does. And when you have conversations like with people in the scene, I used to feel like, why do I not care as much?
Right.
And then I think when Neural DSP came along, and this is not just me like plugging you guys, by the way, like it actually felt so good, because I could think to myself, I don't need to be a Pliny, I don't need to be a Nolly, I don't need to be any of these guys. I can just be who I am, enjoy, enjoy the fruits of the innovation of all these wonderful people, and still feel just as much a part of this scene as anyone else. So I think, it reflects more on myself than anything else. But
Right.
but yeah, like I think Neural was very, very instrumental in me falling in love with like guitar again.
That's that's a really fair statement, because that's like, I have similar experience. I honestly didn't really think that I was going to be a guitar player in the music industry at a certain point, because I had suffered an injury in my left hand. I had some really, really bad tendonitis that stopped me from playing guitar, and that was for the better part of a year. Which is when I got into audio, and I figured like, okay, well, this is just what I'm doing now. I'm just going to be servicing other musicians, and that's how I'm going to kind of retain my foothold in the music that I love to do, and production and stuff like that. And then I start working with Neural plugins, and I'm like, I actually found that spark of joy again, because it was just so easy to get into it. Like there was nothing, like it was just plug and play, which I'm a very utilitarian person. Like to be very honest, I I barely played any other guitar amps aside from like a Mesa dual rectifier before working with Neural stuff. Like that was it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, just being able to kind of get into it and not like just be immersed in the music, I think was the thing.
It's about going back to the music again, which is ultimately why all of us got into this stuff, and not to get so lost in like this sea of, because it became a thing, right? Like everyone's just like, everyone wants to like show, okay, I know about, capacitor circuits and this and that, and like compression ratios and frequencies and all of this stuff. And I'm thinking like, by trade, I am like production guy, like I do produce and I engineer and stuff. Like why don't I care? And it's so funny, because then recently I saw this interview with Devin Townsend where I realized that someone as accomplished as Devin Townsend is actually feels exactly the same way. He said something like, I don't remember exactly what he said verbatim, but like it was basically, he tweaks something and he either doesn't like it or it makes him happy. And if it makes him happy, he doesn't question, he just rolls with it, So it's like, you just, you fiddle around and try to get to what makes you happy as quickly as possible, as opposed to like tweaking for the sake of tweaking. And giving yourself that validation of that, oh, look at me, like I know all of this stuff. I don't know, it's a weird one, but I definitely feel, and speaking of injuries, like last year, I also like had a really bad like shoulder injury. So this whole shoulder joint was frozen, right? So I couldn't, and this is right when we had lockdown. So I couldn't play guitar for, again, like 5 or 6 months-ish. But even during that time, like when I was producing for people, like people would I would just insist, send me DIs,
Yep.
because I'm just like, I've got this suite of software tools where it's nothing. It's like a couple of clicks and I can just make anything sound insane, right? And there's no fear of it sounding like everything else that's out there, because somehow, and I don't know how you guys do it, there's some sorcery here.
There's some magic. I'm not privy to it, but there's some magic going on behind the scenes.
Like, it doesn't sound like me using, say, like even the same archetype Pliny setting or the same preset is going to sound different from someone else. Like, and when it comes to digital modeling, this has generally never been a thing. Like, you can usually instantly identify, okay, that sounds like a pod, or maybe, okay, that kind of sounds like an XFX or something. You know, whereas with these plugs, I'm like, that just sounds great.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, and it works on everything. You know, I can run vocals through it.
Yes. That's honestly one of like my favorite things to do, is to use these plugins for like other applications between like drum compression or vocal delays and reverbs and stuff. It's so much fun.
Yeah, it's just so liberating. Again, like, you can just switch things in and out, and you don't waste time, you know, getting from here to there, you know, like, it's very tactile, despite it being all on a laptop. It just feels really, really tactile, you know, the way it would be if you were just like swapping blocks in and out.
No, absolutely. I mean, like the ultimate goal is to have a tool that does not break flow. You know, like there's that stream of consciousness when you actually get into a project, you get into like a riff or a song, and you just work. You know, the more time you have to take thinking about like logistics of like, oh, which plugin is going to get me this, which plugin is get me that, you know, but that's just not there. And that's one of the most like freeing aspects of what we do.
100%. You know, and I remember thinking that when it comes to the whole modeling thing, there's always been this focus on like it being just like indistinguishable from the real thing, whatever that may be. You know, well, either the amp that you're specifically saying like your product is modeled after, or whichever one of the archetypes it might be. But like, I feel even if like there may be like subtle differences that I personally don't even care about, because you know, good is good, different is different, but it allows you to get to the music as quickly as possible without, you know, without menu diving, without all of that stuff. And like I said, you know, there's people out there like who thrive on that stuff and who love it, you know, and who are like my bass player, you know, Krishna. I love him to bits, but like, you know, he gets off on, you know, tweaking stuff, you know, like, and he can spend like hours doing that and just like really vibing out. And whereas I'm unfortunate, I mean, for better or for worse, I'm just not that guy. I'm just like, I've got this thing in my head. I want it to sound good, and I want to get there as quickly as possible. Otherwise, I'm going to lose the idea and I'm going to get bored and shelve it.
Right.
So,
right. Well, I think that's been one of the most like one of the biggest advantages of working for Neural. Like the thing that's really kind of been drilled into me is just execution. Because like I have deadlines, you know, it's like, okay, well, I gotta write this song, record it, mix it, master it in like 3 days. All right, cool. Yeah. I have zero time for faffing about, you know, so like I have to just get it done, and taking more time out of that to like, you know, oh, maybe I should pump the mids up by like 0.25 and then I'll do this. And like, yeah, it's just not going to work at all in those circumstances.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you know, the other thing, of course, when you're producing, and I feel like those of us who are guitar players, you know, and who have transitioned over into, say, you know, the production side of things, we've always been so obsessed with the guitar aspect of it.
Yes.
That we spend inordinate amounts of time, like, you know, obsessing over the guitar. And by the time you actually are done with the guitar, and you move on to other things, it's almost like that's an afterthought, or you've like burnt out a significant percentage of your objectivity, and sort of kind of lost the big picture.
Well, yeah.
And what I feel Neural has allowed me to do is not only can I promise someone like, you know, if you give me a stems today, I can guarantee you a turnaround in 48 hours, you know,
right?
Because I know I'm not going to spend 4 hours tweaking the guitar sound.
Absolutely.
It's going to take all of 15 minutes and it'll be done. And then what I can actually do is like work on the song, you know, like whether it be like delay throws, automation, all of the things that actually make a production sound that actually give a production like its signature sort of sound, or like make it sound like really working for the song, and not just like a static mix. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, it just, and you have so much more objectivity, perspective, because I do believe that objectivity and perspective are finite. Like when you're working on something, there is a fixed amount of time after which you will start to burn out. When you get so zoomed in, you start losing the big picture, and then then it's kind of like, then it becomes really hard to get that back. First impressions are always like so critical.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, like I think that's one aspect where even when I'm not the guitar player, even when I'm just like overall producer, I just feel like I think this is where tech is headed, really. Like it's about getting to the idea as quickly as possible, and that also involves like the visual like stimulus that you get. This is one thing I really felt like the way the plugins have been designed, like just visually, like I don't know what it is, but like it definitely plays a part in like you sort of seeing the sound or like getting a certain feeling. Am I making sense?
No, yeah, absolutely. The aesthetics like lend themselves towards the vibe of the plugin and the sounds that you're getting from it. I absolutely agree.
I think that tech in general, like we've kind of hit the ceiling of what's possible in terms of like technical accuracy. I mean, I think we're definitely at the stage of diminishing returns now, where it's like, how much more really? I mean, maybe you can like really strive for like point something % more fidelity, right? So now, like, I think where technology is gonna be going towards in the future, I think is less in terms of like technical fidelity, but more in terms of like vibe and like the intangibles, like trying to actually like capture ideas quicker, like facilitating,
Yeah, I think things are going to get a lot more experimental. I think avenues of audio production and processing are definitely going to be explored more than just, as you said, like recreation of a realistic tone. I think you're absolutely correct.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's such a good thing, because I feel like ultimately what we are moving towards is anyway, like, I mean, music has been devalued as a product, right? We all know that. So there's less and less money going around for people to, like hire, traditional big studios, or like go and, spend a whole bunch of money on making a record and things like that. So I do feel like the future is to a degree in like self-recording, self-engineering, production. And hello?
Oh yeah, just for a second. You're back.
Oh, yeah, I closed for a second. I definitely feel like sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
We were just talking about, you said most bands are going to go more towards like self-production, self-recording, because there's not enough real cash flow to kind of go around for a lot of bands to afford that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think that like the future of the recording industry, and a lot of producers and engineers are going to be horrified at me saying this, but like I do feel like the future is in people recording themselves, and if they really need it, and if they really feel like they need something to sound professional, they can and hire out, say, like professional mixers, professional mastering engineers, things like that. There'll always be a market, I feel like, for mixers and things like that. But I think when it comes to actually like capturing things, it is a luxury to be able to go to like the ideal recording space and spend a bunch of money doing that. I mean, because like I said, there's no budgets, and I think it's not a bad thing. If it's possible for someone to get a really good sounding source like in their home, then that's awesome. It just means more music.
Absolutely.
And I think I think really like it's very freeing. It just reduces the number of obstacles that you've got between your ideas and them being consumed.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. The barrier to entry has lowered so much. As you say, it's sort of not outdated. It's not going to push like the music studio, like those sessions where you can go in and record your band. It's not pushing them out into like complete obscurity, right? But that's going to be for those bands that have actually started to gain a following. Like majority of bands that I know nowadays, like you look at like Spirit Box, and they've used the growing tech industry, like with social media and creating their own music videos, to grow a community around them to support them in their musical endeavors. And it's really interesting to watch the tactics of bands change over time, because everything's changing. You know, the old ways of the music industry are being nullified right now. And watching bands kind of like shift their strategies to you know, kind of account for, you know, the really like turbulent, you know, changes is very fascinating to watch.
It is. And I think that it is also going to be like, because of the way tech is evolving, it's also going to be easier and more affordable for people to, you know, not just like embrace these new paradigms, but also like keep up with the speed at which they're happening. Because things are changing all the time, right? Like,
yes.
I mean, I feel like, you know, just the landscape is changing on an everyday basis. And really like, it can often be overwhelming trying to be on top of it all, but you know, I also feel like that's where tech is going to be headed, like in the future, like sort of simplifying things as opposed to like, you know, being intimidating.
Well, I think we were also kind of talking about it before the live stream, kind of in you know, in reference to like live streaming and OBS and stuff like that. There's like a pretty steep learning curve. And I said that I think I said something along the lines of like, you have to become a professional troubleshooter. And I think that that's really apt for today's musicians, because they all have to now learn so many new you know, ways of thinking. They have to like gain so many more skills. Like you can't just be a guitar player anymore. You have to be a guitar player that has a social media presence. You have to have some management stuff. You have to know a little bit of tech. You have to have a DAW so you can record your DIs and know just enough so that way you can get a clean signal and good edits. Like it's, you know, it's very, very.
There's nothing bad about it. It
no,
just
absolutely.
Is what,
Yeah.
And I think it's actually very healthy for people to have an understanding of all of these skill sets, so that, you know, even if supposing they were to find themselves in a situation years down the line where they are able to afford to outsource certain aspects of those things to, like, you know, specialists, then it's just better, because there's just like a deeper understanding and a deeper respect for and valuing for those people.
Yes,
you know?
Absolutely.
So, and you know, as I said, like it just means more music for the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, where do you think that the metal scene is, like, where do you see the metal scene going from here? Like, I feel like we've sort of like kind of ground to a standstill as far as like innovation. As you said, like people are still pushing the boundaries so much. Like you have Tosin Abasi, you have like all these people who are really pushing the envelope. But I feel like that's like, as you said, like in reference to something else, like there's sort of like diminishing returns now. And you have people like yourself moving into like the pop world with like White Moth, Black Butterfly, and the integration of like multiple other styles into metal. Like where do you see the future of this sort of guitar playing genre moving to?
I definitely feel like it's a bit of that. I feel like the boundaries between genres are just going to keep getting more and more blurred. And I feel like, as you know, as we said, like as information becomes easier and easier to access, as it becomes less and less intimidating to sort of learn, you know, new styles, learn new vocabularies, learn new technologies, all of that stuff. I feel like it, you know, because now someone who just like, who happens to like culturally be influenced by, let's say, I don't know, like some obscure genre of music, which may be like very localized to, you know, that person geographically, you know, where they come from, like that's traditional there, whether it be classical music or whether it be folk music or whatever. And, you know, metal, I feel like, is something that's a lot more universal. So I feel like you can take so many of these things, and I think metal responds as a style. Like I feel like it responds very well to, you know, accepting these elements of other genres, because it is so rhythmic, because it is so melodically driven. There's just so much scope to incorporate elements of electronic music, incorporate elements of jazz. I mean, we've seen that happen for like decades now. You know, you've got there's a band from India that actually does metal, but he plays on a sitar, which actually was pretty popular for a little while. And I was just like, oh, that's great. That's a new sort of sound right there. So I think like it's getting easier and easier to carve out like niches for yourself, like if you choose to like think outside of the box.
Yeah.
And people are just going to keep increasing their vocabularies. I feel and as we listen to more and more different music that keeps inspiring us, I think that even more interesting like crossovers are going to happen.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. What would you say is a good practice? Like, so for say a metal guitar player who's potentially getting bored with what they're doing, what would you say is a good like practice for them to kind of breaking out of their bubble, so to speak?
You mean like when it comes to creativity?
Yeah, absolutely.
I really think like one thing that helped me for sure was to listen to music that wasn't guitar based, because I had started associating guitar with like, like this exercise or with like this challenge where it's like, why am I not able to break past like, my very limited physical skill set? Like I was very conscious of the fact that like, I know these shapes and my right hand can like maybe pick at, certain downstrokes per second or whatever, like, your limitations. So when I would listen to guitar music, like at some level, like I'd be analyzing, oh, this guy's doing something which I'm not capable of doing, stuff like that, which actually speaking, like music listeners, no one listens to music like that. I mean, unless you're a musician, right?
Right. Yeah.
And this is something that I tell a lot of younger artists that I produce as well. When they're listening to say like a mix that I send them, and I can see them like listening, right? Like, and then yeah, is it okay? I don't know. I have to like sit them and tell them, listen, like no one listens to music the way you're listening right now. Like, you're listening from like a very forensic perspective. Now, sometimes when you've been playing your instrument for so long and it becomes like you said, like an obstacle in your creativity, then sometimes I think what can really help is listen to stuff where it's physically not possible to achieve that stuff with like with either your instrument of choice, or it may be, but it allows you to think, oh, here's something that I am capable of doing, which I haven't even thought of yet. I just didn't know it, because for me, like what I thought was the next possible level of like, say, composition using guitar was not possible for me right now because of my skill set being limited, or because I just don't have the chops, or because I don't have the theoretical background, or because I just don't know, like, I don't know how to write certain chord progressions where, things like that.
Right.
I definitely feel like for me, what really helped was like listening to a lot of piano music. And interestingly, piano is an instrument I had a very difficult relationship with. Like I grew up learning the piano, but I was unfortunate. Like I had some really good teachers when I was really young, but I had one teacher like when I was in my teens who was less than ideal, like, and I think it's very possible sometimes to be scarred by, like a particularly nasty teacher that sort of makes you feel like, you're wasting their time or that you're just not good enough.
Right.
And it just really, and I sort of went over to the guitar being like, oh, you know what, here's this world of rock and roll where no one's going to judge me for being inadequate. I can be whoever I want to be, and F you if you think otherwise. Until, of course, like you find yourself in a situation largely of your own making, but where you've built up this scenario in your head where you're not good enough anymore.
Right.
Because like you hit a creative rut, or you've hit writer's block, or just because you need a change of scenery. Whether it be physical or whether it be like to start listening to something different that just breaks those cobwebs, I think, in your head of like what music is supposed to sound like, what it's supposed to be like. So I think, yeah, just a shock to your system. So I started listening to a lot of like Nils Fram and Olafur Arnalds and a lot of string music, a lot of piano music, nothing technical, just like beautiful piano music. Like it's like you can hear the sound of the guy breathing. You can hear like his chair creaking while he's playing, and I'm just thinking like metal is pretty much like the opposite of that. Like it's become like a very, dare I use the word, sterilized,
Yes.
very sanitized sort of genre where like perfection, perfection, perfection.
Mm-hmm.
Like things are edited to perfection. Like things are, everything's like DI'd. Uh, Everything is tuned. I mean, it is what it is, but I feel
Of
like
course.
it also, um, it just makes you hear music very differently suddenly when you're placed in when you start listening to stuff where all these imperfections are embraced,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, oh, that can be musical, you know. Um,
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I think it was Meshuggah's album, I think that Clockworks was on. You actually heard like
uh,
string
yeah,
squeak on a couple of
yeah,
tracks. And I remember
yeah,
listening to those tracks and going like,
yeah.
what? That's
Did
that's that's
Meshuggah do
unheard
that?
of. That's unheard
Yeah,
of. Where is that from?
yeah. I know exactly what you mean. And you know what? Like when I thought about it, I was like, I can totally see them being in the studio, listening to that, pointing it out, and be like, "That's staying."
Yes.
You know, like
Yes,
that's staying.
absolutely.
Like, don't get rid of that. Because it just becomes like almost an addiction or like an obsession with like cleaning, cleaning, cleaning.
Hmm.
Again, because everything is so DAW, right? Like everything's so visual now that like we almost like when we take certain mixing decisions, when we take production decisions, we're like looking at waveforms and numbers and meters while we're doing it. So everything has just become about perfection, 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 without us even being aware of the fact. So suddenly when you start listening to stuff where there's no click involved, you can tell that it's probably just room mics. You
Hmm.
can hear all the other stuff, and just allow yourself to accept that as being like, this is what I'm going to listen to and I'm really liking it. And
Right.
then as I kept listening to that sort of stuff, like I would put on Nils Frahn's All Melody album. Like I would put it on before I went to bed, like I think every day for almost 2 months. It was like my go to sleep sort of album. And after a point, like I found myself internalizing certain moves, certain melodies, the way he would reach for certain notes.
Hmm.
Um, and and I just started then thinking, oh, that would be cool. Maybe if on the guitar I did something like that. Went from this note to that note in a similar way as he did. It would sound nothing alike,
Yes.
but but there you go. Like that's an idea that you wouldn't have thought of, if you were still listening to the same genre and thinking and looking for inspiration. And sometimes you
Absolutely.
can find inspiration when you're not really looking.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, just the other day I was watching a video of like some 5-year-old prodigy plays the piano, and I was like, oh, that's a really cool movement because it had this like little jangly like like, and it had like that parallel movement. I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like, and if I had just picked up the guitar and just been listening to my regular guitar music, I would have never really thought about the layers and the interaction of the specific notes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think as you get better and better at your instrument, you're able to like identify these things in other genres a lot better as well.
Hmm.
Where sure, like you are breaking those cobwebs in your head when you're like a guitar player who's tired of guitar music or like saturated with guitar music, listening to say synth music or piano music or whatever, like clarinet or whatever it might be. But you're much more adept at making certain connections or thinking, oh, what if that could be really cool if I layered this sort of like drum groove over it, like, and put it into this context. you know at least that's how I've always thought. I found myself thinking that way quite a lot. I feel like a lot of my own ideas, which translate into the projects that I'm a part of, do come from unlikely sources.
Right.
They're inspired from like strange esoteric things, like that you wouldn't normally expect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I don't know. Like, I've recently been challenging myself to write as simple a riffs as possible and make the rest of the arrangement kind of hold up the background of the song. Like, the Soldano just recently released, and I did a track, and I was kind of like, okay, well, I'm gonna try and think of like maybe like a carnival kind of style riff, you know, and
Yeah.
and
Oh man.
the chord progression was like super simple, and it was
Yeah.
just I just layered the notes on that sounded good, and because I originally I got the Soldano and I started doing my usual like, okay, well, maybe Phrygian dominant, maybe harmonic minor, you know, doing my regular like linear kind of style riffs, but I was like really bored. I was really
Yeah.
bored by it. So then I was like,
Those are
okay,
your moves. That's muscle memory. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I just, you know, I decided, you know, what can I do that's just simplistic? You know, I'll have something kind of cool on the drums going, make the bass fit with that, and then, you know, just make it a song rather than try and thinking of it just as like, how can I riff and solo on this plugin?
Oh man, I completely agree with you. And I don't know how we find ourselves suddenly feeling the pressure to like actually think that way. Because I think
Well, social
I
media is a huge thing. I
yeah,
honestly, I think social media is a huge thing. You see these just monster guitar players, you know, just shredding it up. And you have, as you like we were talking earlier, it's like we have people that are just like pushing the boundary of the technical prowess of the guitar. And as a guitar player, as a metal guitar player, I feel that pressure to kind of
yeah,
compete almost, you know, that it's
exactly.
like it's not as good if it's not as flashy. Like if I can't do, you know, 8-finger taps, then
Yeah,
I'm obviously losing out on something.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. And I feel like your approach is something that I resonate with a lot. I feel like I've always, especially when you're writing on the computer, it's almost like Legos, right? Like, you take something really simple and on its own, like it's vanilla as hell, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not really impressive, but you're like, all right, layer this little thing on top of it, and then layer that little thing on top of that. And then before you know it, like you've sort of constructed this thing where it's like it actually sounds pretty cool, but you didn't think of all of that in one go.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, we fall into this trap of looking and just being so awed by all these insane like virtuosos that are out there, like Ichika Nato, for example.
Hmm.
Nito, like I mean, I love watching that guy's YouTube channel. Like, I mean, it's absurd guitar player, right? But
Yeah.
like, and I'm thinking to myself, why I'm not gonna sit at my desk and like think like start writing unless I've got like a mind blowing idea in my head.
Right. That
But it
that's
doesn't work that way. Even after having so many albums out, like you still find yourself, falling into that trap.
absolutely, man. Dude, I mean, like, imagine I'm making content for a YouTube channel that shares the same space as Nolly and Tosin Abasi and like all of these like you know, it's like my content is right there next to theirs, and I'm like getting all like self-conscious, like, you know, that imposter syndrome starts like creeping in. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know, I don't know.
I'm gonna be judged so hard.
Oh yeah, yeah,
That
absolutely. But I mean that, you know, to, you know, banking on that, like the community that we've built up though has been so supportive of what I do though as well. Like, you know, in saying that, those are all of my internal things, and I've never had anybody, you know, seriously go on and say, "Oh, you're shit" or whatever. Like we've had trolls, you
yeah,
know. There's always going to be trolls, and that's
yeah,
fine. I don't give a shit about them. But like, there's definitely like a very positive, you know, reinforcement with the people that consume a lot of the stuff that I make, because you know, obviously I'm not doing it for showiness. Like I'm doing it to promote, you know, the plugins capabilities, and also kind of educate the people, you know, that are watching the videos in the same in the process, which is ultimately my main goal, is just to help people realize the capabilities that they have within the tools that we provide them.
yeah. And rather than like impressing them or like intimidating them with like all of you're trying to like get them to do exactly what we've been struggling with, which is like just plug in your guitar and play something that makes you happy.
Yes.
Not just in terms of like the musical content, but like the sound, like the way it sounds, like without having to think too much.
Mhm.
It's there, it's in front of you, and it's in your hands, and it's not that hard. Or you can spend 5 minutes and get the sound of your dreams. Like it's all there for you. Yeah.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
there's no pressure to know exactly what it's doing. You don't need to know. Just do
Mhm.
what you're doing. Make the music.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I did a live stream just last week where I was just kind of messing around with writing up some music, and I just, was like, okay, what should I write? And people were like, oh, Spirit Box. And I'm like, goody. Okay, cool. Sure. Fine. Why? Grab my 8 string and I like, so I was using the quad cortex, and I just pulled up 3 blocks, and it was like, oh wow. Like that's the sound. That's it. Like it was just like I think it was the Soldano block, and then like maybe like a Mesa Boogie cab or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was just like that's it, and I could just go on. Like I didn't have to like faff about it with any like dials or knobs or anything like that. I just did some minor tweaks here or there, and it was just dialed in.
And it's so weird because when I started doing this with the neural stuff, like in the beginning, I actually felt like a little bit of a fraud because I was like, this is way too easy. Like, and there was this project that I was doing. I'm not even kidding. Like, there's this band from Lahore, like great Pakistani metal band. Like, I'll plug them at some point. So I was doing their latest single that they released a little while back, and they'd sent me, like DIs and everything. Like, they'd sent me like their tones as well, like which I think they'd used. I think Fractal AX8 and something. Not bad at all, but I just took those DIs, and this is when I had the beta for Akrab Gujera.
Yes.
And I was just like, okay, I've just gotten this. Like, it sounds sick.
Yes.
I'm not particularly feeling creative right now, but here we go. Like, here's a bunch of riffs. Let me put it on there. I just slapped, I kid you not. I put it on there. I tweaked like a few dials, and it was there. Like, that was the sound.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I caught myself thinking like, oh, maybe I need to, like EQ it a little bit more just to make myself feel like I'm actually like, pulling my weight here, because, is it just that like I have this like one plugin that, if they had, then they wouldn't need to hire me? Well, no, of course not.
Of course.
It was almost too easy. Like it was just, and it was so liberating because I was like, all right, cool, that's it. Guitars are done. Sound is great. I can actually focus on like, like the holistic big picture and like, make the song, really work on mixing the song and not work on like obsessively, like, shaping the guitar tone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, guitars are notoriously bad at taking EQ. I mean, sorry, this is the one nerdy moment I'm going to allow myself, but like, they don't respond very well to, like having tons of like frequencies. Like,
oh, yeah.
Out. It just sounds hollow and it just sounds like unsatisfying.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I get a sound where I'm just like, this sounds amazing out of the box, and I don't need to make that, all those cuts. It's great. Move on,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. The impulse responses, the EQ that's built into the plugin too, like it's all built to be mix ready. It's all built so the experience of using them is just seamless and enjoyable. Like there's nothing worse than pulling up an impulse response and being like, that kind of fits, but also like I'm hearing that 4K. Like that that whistle, and now I got to cut that out. All right, now something else is poking out since I don't hear that anymore. Yeah. Okay, so I just cut that. Yeah, so you start like chasing it down.
Or then you start like flipping through like a billion impulses, and then you're just like, I don't really know what anymore.
Absolutely.
But this is to go full circle to like the whole thing of everyone just feeling so welcomed and celebrated in this scene of ours. Like, it's possible for there to be a Nolly. There will only ever be one Nolly because no one hears music the way he does. No one thinks about like tech innovation in the specific way that he does, just like no one thinks like Tosin does. And, like they are making this stuff and collaborating with you guys and, creating all of this groundbreaking technology so that the likes of us can actually be free and, just spend less time like obsessing and more time just making the music while actually being just as welcomed within this, larger sphere of this community that is now, of course, like a massive global thing.
Yeah.
But there's space for everyone. And I think to go back to your point, like a lot of this is in our own heads, like we create these blocks and stuff, in our own mind, the fear of being judged, the imposter syndrome, all of that stuff. Like, but it is what it is. I mean, these things happen. It's just part of growing, and
I mean, there's a lot of maturing that needs to happen as well. Like that imposter syndrome is definitely something that I've dealt with for, a long time. But at a certain point, the differences I found between the people who have made it and the people who have not is just execution. Like the people who have made it, talk to like Devin Townsend, and he suffers from imposter syndrome. Like that dude, like Devin Townsend.
Yeah.
It's just a universal thing that everybody kind of feels. Like there's always going to be that element, and it's just a matter of like, are you just going to execute and just see what happens? Like that's it.
Yeah. When we were on tour with the Deftones, I remember Steph saying this really profound thing where he said, like, success is just in the act of doing what you're doing. Like that is the success.
Yes.
That's exactly what you just said. It's the execution or lack thereof that makes or breaks whether, you make it or you don't. And, especially as you release more and more stuff, because in the beginning, it's like, okay, these are your first ideas, and like, cool, like, you make a collection of your 10 greatest ideas, you package them and you put them out as a record. And then, okay, it does decently well. Some people respond to it, a lot of people don't. Then you make another one, then a lot of people start responding. All right, cool, this is cool. And then those expectations, then you're like, now I have to like up that. And now I have to be better than that. And I have to impress these people, because otherwise I'm going to be compared to this version of myself from 5 years ago, even though objectively speaking, that person from 5 years ago was an inferior musician in every way, because I have grown since then. I've learned new stuff. I've listened to more music. Like I've gained more inspiration and influences from different areas, but I'm just getting crippled by all these imaginary expectations to the point that I stop myself from executing because I feel like I won't be as good as the version of myself from 5 years ago. Does that make sense? Like,
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's one reason why I've always respected Opeth, for example. Like that's a band who it just like subverts expectations with every album. They're just like, you all want the growly stuff.
Yeah.
We're just going to do clean vocals that next one.
Yeah.
We're going to do a prog rock album.
Yeah.
And, we're going to save all like this super metal stuff that we've just been like hanging on to. And we're just, maybe release it in the future. Maybe.
Yeah. Whether you like it or not, tough luck.
Yeah.
Or Stephen Wilson for that matter. Like he had absolutely no hesitation in just being like, guitar doesn't inspire me right now, so I'm going to do other stuff.
Yes.
And maybe I'll come back to it, like down the line. I found that like really inspiring because it was like, suddenly this thing which is supposed to be like your vehicle, if it suddenly starts being a burden, they're like, what do I have, right? Like I'm a failure. So yeah, I mean, it's funny how, but then again, like these are things that I think just come with maturity and you have to work past them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, time, energy, experience like that. It culminates. And I think that's one reason why, like, people, like I've tended to kind of like start moving away from the more guitar centric sort of ideas. It's like, I really love just a well-crafted, rock song where all the elements play their parts. Like you listen to like some Mastodon songs and it's like they seamlessly move from piece to piece where it's like, okay, now this instrument is the focal point. Now the drums are the focal point. And every instrument has its place. And I really love that it's not so like we're just going to play rock, guitars the entire time. It's just going to be the riff and everything's going to center around the riff.
Exactly. Even Bring Me the Horizon for that matter.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like their last few records have gone. Like, it's just like the verse will be all about like, oh, that's like a really cool sounding bass section, and it may not even be like a complicated riff or anything. It's just like this crazy fuzz tone that they'll have going on, or like, just hooks, but like not necessarily like hooks in the way we know, what hooks are supposed to be, which is like sticky melodies or things like that, like just something which grabs you like from section to section. It's a different thing, but it all just comes together. And, I think that's actually where, to touch back on, where we see metal going. I feel like sound is going to play a much more like prominent role going forward. I think, it's not just in terms of like how many riffs you can put together or like, how much more we can reinvent, how many more riffs we can come up with within the same, like that kind of that we have available to us, but also sonically what's possible and, just yeah, just pushing the boundaries with that, like interesting new sounds, atonal sounds. Um, you know, it. I for one am really excited.
Yeah, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree, and it's nice to be sort of on the forefront, watching this revolution happen in real time. You know, we have a lot of users posting up their music and their art in the neural forums. So I get to kind of see the progression that people are taking with the plugins, and it's like there are a lot of avenues there that I would have never really thought about. You know, there's actually a buddy of mine. He's not even a guitar player. He works in post production. We're hopefully going to do a live stream soon, but he's used a whole bunch of like the neural products to create like that Doom 2016 like heavy industrial stuff. And I'm like, I want to see that. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, sign me up for that one. I'm really curious about that too.
Yeah. Absolutely. So,
Awesome.
yeah, man. I want to be conscious of your time. So, I mean, user questions sound good to you?
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, so we got a couple. Archie Roger asks, walk us through your songwriting process, like how you go from riff to riff, layer to layer, verse to chorus, etc. I'd love to get your views all the ways into note selection, chord progression, etc.
So thanks for that question, Archie. Archie?
Yeah, Archie.
So like we touched on, like I really look at it as like building blocks or like Legos, because for me everything happens on the computer. I mean, that's just, I was never that guy who would go into jam rooms with a bunch of dudes and like, I mean, I've done that. We've all done that. But like, that wasn't like my comfort zone when it came to like writing and creating, and, that fear of being judged, like it was never there when I'm on the computer, like, in my bedroom, whatever, like doing stuff. So it usually starts with something really simple, because I'm not like the most, again, like I'm not trying to like, downplay or like be that guy, but like I'm not super technical, or I don't think very like in terms of like chops, like very technically oriented stuff. So it'll be like really simple things, but then what I'll do is like I'll just jam over them, and a lot of times it'll start with a riff, and let's say you've got like a move, like whether it be like from one chord to another chord to a third chord, and you're like, ooh, I like the way that, the flavor that brings. And that by itself is just like a very nascent thing, right? What I then do, okay, and this is a little controversial or maybe not, but there's this quote by this really famous like film director, I forget what his name is, but he says that like the great, like good artists borrow, but the best artists steal.
Yes.
So like, I don't know who it's by, it's escaping my mind right now, but I have this thing like where, something that I've been listening to, which is very different, which may not be metal at all, or, something else, like, but there's something about what I've been listening to in general, maybe not while I'm listening to it actively, but when I'm doing other stuff, like, going about my day, music is always playing in our heads, right? Like we've always got some song or the other going on in our head. So I'm just like marinating on that stuff and thinking like, there's an element of that. What if I juxtaposed that over this thing that I'm doing here, and you can try that out, because it's all like it's just mouse clicks and
right.
Playing your instrument like DI into your interface, like for the most part. So that's usually how it starts, and then I'll just like jam over things. Once you've got like a drum groove, I do definitely feel that like being somewhat proficient with programming drums can really help here. Because I do know that that's like a stumbling block for a lot of people, like they don't get like a good feeling or a good, they get a very mechanical sounding drum loop, and it can sometimes be a little like off-putting in terms of, the feedback that you get from it. But yeah, so I usually start there, and then it's like, okay, jam over that. All right, let's flip presets till we come across like a really nice, like shimmery, clean sound. All right, that sounds good. Like, what can I come up with? All right, put that there. And then when it's like time to say like, okay, I've got a lot of stuff for like this one section and there's a lot going on. Let's take one of those layers, like move them there, like to a blank section, and write new parts over that. And take that drum groove, replace the hi-hat with a ride, and like maybe put the snare on, instead of on every second accent, but on every fourth accent. And that's your verse, whereas that was your chorus. Like, so you basically parts are like versions of each other, but so different by the time you're done with them that no one can really tell.
Oh,
But there's
absolutely.
always but the advantage of that is that you'll never end up with things that sound like they're stitched together. Like because there's always that one common thread
Yeah.
going, even if that actual common thread doesn't make it to both sections, like they'll have been written with that common thread like in mind. So like it'll always keep like that sense of like, okay, this belongs,
Yeah.
as opposed to like, okay, I need to like just shoehorn like part in there.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about because it's because you're talking about like theme and variation, like taking like
Yeah.
your original idea, making a variant of that, and then so that way it doesn't sound like a riff salad. I think that's one of the things that just plagues music, like guitar oriented music, is just having a riff salad. Like, okay, well these two riffs are in the same BPM, so just just knock them together, and that's good.
Yeah, but it's not working. Why is it not working? I don't know. How do I make it work? Is it like the drums? Is it like a fill? No, it's not necessary. Like sometimes like literally like you can use parts and layers so efficiently if you think about it. A lot of times like what you hear, like what may be just like adding a very subtle flavor to one section. If you take that elsewhere and make it like the main bit in like the other section, you won't even notice that it's the same thing there. But like subconsciously, like it does, your brain does register as it being like belonging to the same piece of music.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's like, it's a hack.
Nice. Ashwath Nair asks, would I be able to dial in a Zayn or Luke's tone from the Acrophase albums, primarily using an archetype Nolly?
So that's the that band from Pakistan that I was telling you about, the Lahore band. So yeah, totally you can. I mean, that's the thing with all of these neural plugins. Like, there's no secret. And when people ask me, like, how did you get that sound, or like, can you share your preset? I'm like, dude, it's really not necessary. Like, it's so simple. You get yourself the demo of that plugin. Literally, you turn like 5 knobs and you're there. Like, that's all I did. There's no secret sauce. There's nothing. Like, everything else that you hear, if it sounds like extra satisfying to you, that's probably because it's a really good riff or a really good song.
Mm-hmm.
But like in terms of the actual tone, like there's really no secret anymore. I mean, the secret is in the code, and the secret is in, what goes on like behind the framework of that plugin. But like there's no secret at our end anymore.
Yeah.
At least not.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that most people, I think the thing that's going to get you closest is just making sure your impulse response is the correct one.
Absolutely.
And my typical practice whenever I'm like trying to go through and pick out a tone, I don't even worry about any of the other dials. Maybe I'll mess around with the gain or put on like the overdrive pedal or something like that. But typically the impulse response is the first place I go. Flip through them very quickly so the ear doesn't have a whole lot of time to adjust to them. Pick out the right one and then go. Like, that's it.
Yeah. The moment you're like, okay, this makes me happy, don't question it. It makes you happy, roll, and then you can like fine tune. Okay, cool. Maybe it's a little saggy. All right, you want to like, dial down like the bass knob a little bit, or you want to tighten up the bottom end. Okay, cool. You engage the overdrive pedal, like you said. But like I think like starting with the cab section and the impulse response is a fabulous way to start, because most of these amps sound amazing with all the knobs pointing at noon.
Yes.
I mean, they're meant to sound great out of the box that way. So really what you want to do is like flip through the cabs and do it quickly, so that, don't think, is this sounding satisfying? Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just swap. Oh, that's cool. Stick with it.
Yep.
And worst case, you can always just swap it out again later. It's just one click.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that gets you in the ballpark, like I've also found that like I make worse decisions when I'm playing through it because I'm hearing the strings and I'm hearing the guitar. So record a piece of the riff and then loop that. So that's my advice.
100%.
Let's see. Skyharbor asks, when did you move to the States and what part of India are you from?
I'm in Mumbai.
I'm
not in the States.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, wait a second, because like looking all the information I read online, I was like, I think he's still in
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, three of our band members actually are currently officially in the US. I mean, our singer is American. Devesha, the guitar player, lives in Hollywood. Krishna, our bass player, was in California. He was doing his master's degree there, but like, I mean, because of the pandemic, he had to come back. But yeah, I mean, I'm still here, you know. I think it just made sense because I think I was kind of on the fence as to whether I really wanted to go full time into touring. And I think that my sixth sense, which told me that, like, you know, your body is physically only going to be able to hack it for a finite amount of time. So, you know, like, consider that you don't want to put all your eggs in that basket. You know,
Oh,
but
I know the feeling.
oh, you do, right? Like, I mean, you've been on tour, haven't you?
I've done a lot of shows, local shows around like Sacramento, like in the California area. Like I have the shoulder issues that all guitar players do because I had the long hair and doing helicopter spins and shit like that. Like it's like there's a certain point, like right now, if somebody said, "Hey, do you want to go on tour?" It's like, as long as I get to stand still, like that would be my stipulation. Like I don't need to rock out. I don't need to like headbang like a madman anymore. Like that's just not. Well, I'm not capable of doing that anymore.
Yeah, yeah. That, and as long as I get to sleep in not a moving vehicle. Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely, like, not the back of a van where you've removed the seats and you're literally sleeping on top of the spare tire. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you can do that. It's a young man's game. Like,
Mhm.
I'm 34 now. I can't do that stuff. Like, I mean, I would literally fall apart if I didn't.
Yeah.
But what was the second half of that question? Did I miss it?
Oh no,
What
no,
was it?
you answered it, dude. So it was
Yeah.
what part of India are you from? Let's see, we got another question. Jason Clausen is asking, do you have a favorite or go-to neural plugin?
That's an impossible question to answer. No, I don't. That's one of the things that I did find happening with me and the XFX, because I mean, this is in no way disparaging it. I mean, it's right here. I'm looking at it. It's a fabulous piece of gear. But because the options are so vast, and once you get into that habit of giving yourself a finite amount of time to work on any given project, where you don't want to spend a lot of time obsessing about guitar tone, what I found myself doing was I had like my go-to presets, which I would stick with, because I was just like, opening up that whole Pandora's box of like, oh, let's try this amp today with, and pick one of like the hundreds of like cab impulses that are there, and like tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak. Man, I'm just not that guy, So like, one of the things that the Neural suite allows me to do, and I'm just so grateful to be a Neural artist here, because literally, I can just think in my head, for this project, let's see what archetype Pliny sounds like. Load it up, like tuck, 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 and it sounds great, right? And if it doesn't, and you're just like, okay, maybe I want a slightly tighter sounding amp. It's like, all right, cool. Drag it out of your insert slot and just like drag, just, all right, cool. Let's try archetype Nolly. Done. Like, again, like within 20 seconds, if it's working or if it isn't working, and you move on. And so I mean, what I do is, because it's so easy to make it sound good, what it also does is it encourages you to experiment within the suite without that fear of like, oh, I'm going to go down that rabbit hole of, things sounding unsatisfactory and, me getting them stressed out about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I know is that like, I maybe won't use archetype Cory Wong on a metal record because it's,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right place, wrong place, and right wrong time.
No, absolutely. I mean, like, you can pull a metal tone out of the Cory Wong, but that's not really what it was designed for. Like that's, but I like your viewpoint on it because it's very utilitarian, which I am very much the same way. Like that, I've gotten that question so many times. Like, what's your favorite plugin? I'm like, my favorite plugin is whatever gets the job done right. That's
exactly.
at the end of the day, that's all I care about.
And there's no reason to actually have like a safe space when it comes to like, okay, like this is my go-to, because they're all awesome and they're all so easy to get sounding good. Like you don't really have to work. So every time, like, in fact, what's an even more fun question is, today I'm feeling like this. Let's roll, As opposed to being like, oh, what would happen if I, swap this out? Or then I have to like back this up because it's quite possible that it's going to end up like sounding like ass after half an hour of tweaking,
Yep. Yep.
Uh, I'm just over that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I think having sort of that utilitarian viewpoint, not having necessarily any favorites, I think the main advantage of that is not just also like not only being able to make decisions quickly and be able to get to like the meat of the music, but also it allows you to be open for experimentation and surprise. Like you could be just like, okay, well, I'm just going to try something today. Like it sounds like an archetype Gojira, but you know what? I'm actually going to try the Nolly instead. We're just going to see what it sounds like. And it just it just slots in and is wonderful right off the bat. So like that also, having said that, it does take a little bit of time and experience and knowledge of the tools. Like people have asked me like, what impulse responses do you use? I'm like, only stock. And it's not just because I work for Neural and I want to make this stuff sounds good. It's also because like I like limiting my tools as well. So that way I just get really, really insanely good at that, like at that thing, because I don't need anything else.
Honestly, that's such an underrated thing, what you just said, which is like limiting your tools is such a good thing to do, because I feel like, especially, when we're young, we feel like expanding our plugin collection is the way to go, because it just means, we've got our pick of whatever, is out there in the ocean. But that's a terrible thing to do, because like, you literally just end up with option paralysis after a point. So I really think like limiting yourself, like imposing restrictions on yourself, whether it be in terms of like the tools that you've got, whether it be in terms of the time that you're going to spend, or, let's say I have to mix a track today. It's like a 5-piece rock band, right? Like you've got synths, you've got guitars, you've got bass, you've got drums, you've got vocals. I'm going to give myself 6 hours to mix this, because I know that after 6 hours, I'm going to be tired. But by the end of those 6 hours, I don't want to just have drums and bass done. I want to have like the mix in a good place.
Yeah.
So then that means, okay, I'm going to divide this up into chunks. I've got 6 hours to do like largely, let's say 6 groups of instruments, an hour per instrument. That's a long time.
Yes.
But it also means that like your brain prioritizes really quickly what it wants and what it doesn't want. You don't go down a rabbit hole because you can. Instead, your brain just immediately like prioritizes, okay, cool, like this is what I like. This is what I want to do here. And I think that's underrated, like trusting our instinct, because, we're faced with so many options. Like we tend to fall into the trap of thinking there's all these options, let's try them out. And, you'd actually be much better off making a split-second judgment based on, what your instinct, because ultimately music is all about instinct, right? Like it's all about how we react and how we respond to things without like analyzing it too much, why we respond a certain way. So, like you got to sharpen that. And the only way you can really sharpen that is to actually put yourself in a situation where you don't have like endless options or like, endless.
Yes, absolutely. I've definitely learned to trust my instinct far more since I started working with Neural. Because again, like I don't have that luxury of time. It's like I have a deadline and I am being paid to do a job, so I'm going to get it done in the time allotted, and I'm going to do the best I can. Learn from my mistakes, because there's definitely like if I go back and listen to the first handful of like demos that I wrote and mixed and mastered for them, I listen to them now and I'm like, I could have done some things a little bit differently. There's some things that I hear now because I have the experience that it's like I didn't hear at the time. And it's like it's always a good like measuring stick to say like, okay, well that's what I did now, or that's what I did then, not this is what I'm doing now. Like even just the visual aspect, like looking back at those first videos, it was me with a Canon T6i, like really terrible color graded garbage in a 20 by 14 studio that I was also sleeping out of in like industrial North Hollywood. But now, I got like this sweet light set up. I got great cameras, lenses, and I've like just learned from experience of just doing it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like, couldn't agree more.
Let's see. What are some, this is kind of a general question from myself. My wife actually put it in the sheet that I have open. But like, what are some artists that you're listening to nowadays that really kind of inspire you that you think people should maybe potentially check out?
I would say check out everyone on the roster of this label called Erased Tapes. They're a label that they kind of specialize in like really moody, like um, often piano driven, but like it's like, you've got Olafur Arnolds, you've got Nils Fram, you've got like that whole Scandinavian um, it's that very European dreamy electronica sort of thing. Like I really like a lot of those artists. Besides that, I'm listening to a lot of soundtrack stuff, probably just because I've gotten into media composition over the last couple of years. So like I find myself listening to, say, like Ludwig Göransson, who did The Mandalorian, who did Tenet, and like some of these crazy blockbusters. But in terms of bands, I've been on an M83 kick again of late, and Don Broco. I don't know if people listening, are you familiar with them?
No.
Don Broco are so good. You're gonna love them. They're just like insanely catchy rock band. Like it's like the most fun that I've had listening to rock music in a really, really long time.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Like produced and I believe like co-written by Dan Lancaster, who does a lot of production for Bring Me the Horizon. So it's similar sort of like sonic palette, but in terms of the songwriting, it's a lot more like just like having fun party rock kind of thing. Like
Don Broco. Okay.
Yeah. Sick man.
Yeah. Okay. I'm good. Because I actually really want to check this out. Like.
Also Ocean Size, but I think like everyone who's like familiar with like my stuff knows that like Ocean Size is like my all-time favorite band, along with Carnival.
Yeah.
Ocean Size and Carnival, actually, yeah, like Ocean Size and Carnival are like two of the bands that like just my whole sensibility comes from there. When it comes to like layers and like interplay between guitar parts, which are actually very simple on their own, but collectively like they form like this almost complex, but like really sort of interesting, note combinations and things.
Yes.
Which aren't because like you've thought of like these crazy harmonies on your own. They're literally like a result of jamming different parts over each other and like accidentally, creating all of this magic.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. I'm super excited that they're going in for a new album soon. I'm.
Oh man, such a tease. Like when we were Skyharbor were in Australia doing our third record, and we were doing it with who's their producer, and he showed us, like he didn't even play it for us, like it was son of a bitch. Like he showed me on the phone looking at a playlist of like the demos that were pre-production demos. He's like, "Do you want to hear it?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "No." I was like, "What a dick move!"
Oh, it's such a cock tease.
Yeah, that's such a cock tease. But I was just like, man, you know what? It's fine. Like, I'll wait. It's gonna be awesome. I'll have my mind blown.
Beautiful. Yeah, I totally agree. I'm really looking forward to that. So awesome. That seems to be it for pretty much the user questions. I mean, aside from like, I have some people asking about Skyharbor's new album.
Well, I mean, it'll be a while. Let's just put it that way. I mean, like the thing is that we want to take our time. If we've retired from, not retired, but like semi-retired from the whole touring thing, it makes no sense. Like it's been long enough since we released anything to the point where like hype has kind of gone a little cold. So there's no point in rushing it now. We'll just take our time, and when it comes out, it'll be because we're really good. Yeah.
So as Neural is famous for saying, soon.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, I guess, so we have all of our user questions done. So, I mean, I'd like to, give you a chance to talk about anything that you'd like to plug as far as, like you mentioned there's a band that you, I think that was Tack Attack, I think.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah. So, whatever you'd like to plug or anything like that, I'll give you.
Yeah. I mean, they're a great band. I mean, they've got an album coming out later this year as well, which I believe we are about to start mixing soon. Besides that, White Moth, Black Butterflies, we're dropping an album in May. I believe it's on the 28th of May via Kscope in the UK. I'm really proud of that. It's a 14-track album. And like I had a ton of fun because like crazy, like mixtures of pop and like industrial and electronic, and like, there's obviously like some guitar driven stuff as well, but like very, very, very proud of that album. So when it's out, do check it out. And yeah, that's, I guess, the obligatory shameless self plug.
Of course, of course. No, I'm actually
Yeah.
like really excited to check it out. The single was awesome, and definitely like it was like I had only heard of the group just recently when I started doing some research, and I was like, I picked it up, I was listening to it because I know who Skyharbor, like I know your sound, and I listened to that, I was like, whoa, holy shit, this is great. Like
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's our co-producer who actually is like quite well known in the prog scene because Randy Slaw. He's from Salt Lake City, genius musician, wonderful producer. He actually started out as a string arranger for Periphery and a lot of like these prog. He's done a lot of stuff with Devin as well, string arrangements mostly. But like we got him on board to like just collaborate on a few songs, and he ended up just becoming a backing member. And like a writing member. So like, yeah, that's an amazing collaboration. Super proud of, just being able to write music with them.
Beautiful.
So yeah, I'll send you the album. Let me know what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So cool. I mean, I guess, we'll go ahead and close out with, generally the way I do this is I like getting your advice and perspective on, musicians in the chat who want to potentially do some of the similar things that you and I do as far as like producing, mixing, mastering, whatever, even just guitar playing or music arrangement. Like, what would you say is the advice that you would give somebody kind of coming up in today's circumstances? Like we've definitely hit a very strange stride in the last couple of years, and things have been changing dramatically. But what would you say would be your advice to these people who want to get into the stuff now?
Honestly, I don't know if there is like an end in sight for this current situation. I mean, like we said, it was COVID-19. We're in mid 2021. This is showing no signs of going away anytime soon, right? Like we're going to be in this situation for a while. So I do feel like being able to engineer yourselves at the very least, like just don't be dependent on other people to at least capture your ideas and lay them down. So my wholehearted advice to young guitar players, aspiring engineers is, guitar players don't depend on engineers to be able to capture your ideas, and engineers, who are musically inclined, although that's pretty rare. Usually you find like musicians who want to like enter engineering, but like, if you really want to be serious about like mixing and producing for other people, just be creative and like use your own stuff, to like, because this is what we're going to be by ourselves for long periods of time. Like this is, I think, where the future is headed towards, is like a lot of people engineering themselves, and then, obviously down the line collaborating with people, regardless of location. But I would also encourage people to collaborate as much as possible. Don't think too much about like, financial reward and stuff like in the initial stages. Like we touched on, music as a product by itself has become so devalued that I think having any expectations of it, like in terms of like getting money back from recording and releasing music, is pretty foolhardy now, So if you're better off just going back to pure art, like treating music purely as an art form. And if you, of course, happen to like down the line, get recognized enough or whatever, things happen to fall in place where you get opportunities to, whatever, like get something back out of it, in terms of like maybe making a career out of it, then great. But collaborate and expand your skill set, like definitely pick up, get yourself like the tools which can serve you well in the long term. It doesn't necessarily need to be the shiniest new toy on the block. It's incredible what you can do with just a laptop, a simple 2-channel, audio interface, and a pair of headphones and a guitar, and a few choice plugins. So really and get the Neural suite.
Of course. No, yeah. I think a really important note you kind of touched on was collaboration, because I think, we are, as you said, going to be kind of alone for for a while, you know, and that this situation's not going to go away. And I think that not only is it important to have something like somebody else to bounce your ideas off of, but also that human interaction is also incredibly important. Like, I mean, honestly, like these conversations I've been having on Wednesday mornings, like this is my time to like socialize and hang out with people. Like it's kind of awesome, you know, because I not only get to meet like really cool people like yourself, but like also, you know, it's like I get to like just hang out with somebody, and it's really like this is important
Something
to
that we
me.
all miss a lot, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And you know, and because collaborating is so important, and we don't have the luxury of being able to do it in person as much anymore, a lot of it is going to be over, you know, through the form of file sharing and, you know, exchanging sessions and projects and things like that. So it's all the more reason, you know, if you're a guitar player, to like just have a working knowledge. You don't need to be an expert or anything, but like just have a working knowledge of how to operate a DAW, how to record yourself, you know, decently enough that like, you know, it's usable, and really just like go out there and make stuff. You know, like don't be your own worst enemy when it comes to, you know, a lot of the stuff that, a lot of the reasons that we put forward, or a lot of the excuses that we make for not executing are really just excuses. You know, like it's all in your own head, you know, so like just break out of it and just create. So
Yes.
yeah,
I like that. I think that's like the best note to end on. Just
that's
don't
enough.
worry
Yeah.
about it. Just execute,
Yeah.
create.
Yeah.
I
No
love
one's
that.
gonna judge you. No one's gonna judge you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So cool. So thank you all in the chat. I appreciate you guys commenting and asking some really amazing questions. And thank you, Keshav. This conversation was genuinely super enjoyable.
Same. I had an awesome time.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. I mean, honestly, you're welcome on anytime. So with that, we'll go ahead and call it a day. Thank you all so much, and we'll catch you all in that next one.
Have a great day, man. Talk to you soon.
All right.
See ya.